There's a special kind of smugness you only find in a suburban HOA president with a new title and a freshly printed batch of business cards. For me, that smugness arrived in the form of a shimmering, gold-embossed invitation slipped into my mailbox like a royal decree. My name was scrawled on the front, not in elegant calligraphy, but in a hurried, aggressive script that seemed to demand my attention. The card announced a massive, community-wide party to celebrate the new neighborhood spirit, complete with a live band, catered food, and a raffle. It was all so very loud. You know the type. The people who mistake forced socialization for genuine community. The invitation went on to list a number of new, mandatory social initiatives designed, it claimed, to bring us all together. The subtext, however, was as subtle as a brick through a window. We know you're the quiet guy on the hill, and we're not going to let you stay quiet. The woman behind it all, Karen, had a specific vision, and it didn't include hermits who kept to themselves. By the way, if you're watching this, drop a comment and let me know where you are. I'm curious to see how far this story reaches. I turned the card over in my hand, feeling the cheap, glossy paper between my fingers. The back contained a small, italicized note. We look forward to seeing everyone there. Your participation is what makes this a true community. It was a pointed jab at my solitary lifestyle, a passive-aggressive call-out. I'm an engineer, and my days are spent in methodical, quiet work, a stark contrast to the performative community building the HOA was pushing. They saw my peace as a problem to be solved. They saw my solitude as a challenge. I saw their party as a liability. The invitation itself was a beautifully ironic artifact, a monument to their overconfidence. It was a call to arms, not for me to join them, but to remind them that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed. I placed the invitation on my desk, right next to a topographical map of my property. I had a feeling I was going to need it. They say if you want to know your enemy, you have to watch them in their natural habitat. For Karen, that habitat was a temporary stage set up on what she believed to be common property, surrounded by white linen tablecloths and an absurdly large ice sculpture of a dolphin. The party was exactly as I had imagined, loud, forced, and brimming with the kind of performative cheer that makes you want to crawl back into your quiet cave. I arrived late, slipping in through the back, a ghost in the crowd. Karen, however, had the uncanny ability of a vulture to spot the weak or the uncompliant. Her eyes locked onto me from across the lawn, and I watched her perfect smile tighten into something thin and venomous. She made her way over, a glass of Chardonnay clutched in her hand like a scepter. Oh, look who decided to grace us with his presence, she said, her voice dripping with mock pleasantness. We were all starting to think you were a myth. Or maybe a hermit with a deep-seated fear of people. She laughed, a short, sharp bark, and the small cluster of neighbors around her joined in, their laughter sounding like the hollow rattle of coins in a tin can. I simply smiled back, a calm and factual response. I've been busy, I said, which was true. I had been busy cross-referencing my property deeds. Karen, undeterred, stepped onto the stage. She tapped a microphone, her voice booming over the speaker system. Now that we have everyone here, I'd like to announce a new policy from the HOA, she chirped. She then launched into a speech about fostering a true community and the importance of shared experiences. She announced a new bylaw requiring all residents to attend at least 3 community events per year, with non-compliance resulting in a fee. As she spoke, her gaze kept returning to me, a smug smirk playing on her lips. It was a perfectly tailored trap, a new rule designed to force me out of my quiet life and into her suburban circus. But as she spoke of her new policy and the fees, my mind was elsewhere. It was on the survey map, on the legal fine print, and on a far more dramatic policy I was about to enforce. Her show was just the opening act. The main event was yet to come. I've found that bullies love to use public forums to make their point. It gives them an audience, an echo chamber of nervous laughter and fake smiles. Karen was in her element, standing on that stage with a microphone in one hand and a fishbowl full of raffle tickets in the other. The prize, a weekend stay at a luxury lakeside cabin, was the centerpiece of her performance. As she pulled the winning ticket, her eyes drifted over the crowd, finally settling on me. The smile she'd been wearing for everyone else fell away, replaced by a hard, calculating look. "And remember," she said, her voice dropping a little as she spoke directly to me, "this is what community looks like. You can either be a part of it, or you can pay the price for your noncompliance." She held my gaze for what felt like an eternity, a silent, theatrical threat delivered with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The crowd murmured nervously, unsure how to react to this public display of aggression. But my mind wasn't on her threats. It was on the raffle itself, on the carefully laid out party, on the very ground beneath her feet. As she made her little speech, my eyes were scanning the scene, not for drama, but for details. The stage was set up exactly where a small grove of oak trees had once stood, near a creek that ran along the base of the hill where my property began. The creek itself was a legal marker, a boundary line I had confirmed time and again with my deeds and surveys. I had been told by the previous HOA that this small wooded area was a community park, but I knew from my own meticulous research that the legal definition of my property extended well beyond my fence line. The map I had spent weeks studying showed the boundary line bisecting the very land where the stage, the catering tents, and Karen's little raffle were all set up. They were trespassing. And not just for the party, but for the last 3 months of community events. I said nothing. I didn't react. I just watched her, the queen of her little kingdom, holding a raffle on my land. She was so consumed with her performance and her threats that she had no idea the entire foundation of her power play was resting on a legal lie. The look on her face was one of triumph, convinced she had won the first battle. Little did she know, she had just given me all the ammunition I needed to win the war. I walked away from the party with a calmness that Karen would have mistaken for defeat. But the truth is, a calm mind is a dangerous weapon. I didn't need to shout or argue. I had something far more potent. Facts. I returned to my quiet home, the silence, a welcome relief from the forced gaiety and passive-aggressive drama I had just endured. The first thing I did was head to my study, a room where every piece of data, every deed, and every survey map was meticulously organized. I pulled out a large, rolled-up blueprint of my property, purchased years ago from the county records office. Next to it, I laid out a digital copy of the HOA's community map, which I had found online. My suspicion, which had been a nagging whisper, was about to become a loud, undeniable truth. I placed the two documents side by side, aligning the key landmarks, the main road, my driveway, and the old creek that ran along the southern border. My finger traced the bright red line on the blueprint, the official boundary of my property. My heart rate didn't quicken, but a cold, methodical sense of purpose settled over me. There it was. Unmistakable. The boundary line cut straight through the area the HOA had been using as a community park. It included the entire party space, the picnic tables, and even the new neighborhood spirit sign they'd installed. It wasn't just a corner, it was the entire section. The HOA for months had been trespassing on my land. And it was worse than that. I pulled up my financial documents. The HOA's quarterly newsletter had boasted about raising funds through events and community fees associated with the park, which they claimed was common property. They had been profiting, illegally, from my land. But the real leverage, the beautiful, ironic detail that made my plan a masterpiece, was a little-known clause in the county zoning laws. It stated that if an owner of a parcel of land zoned as private woodland could prove unauthorized commercial use by a separate entity for a period of more than 6 consecutive months, they could legally rezone the area to exclusive private use, revoking all public access and transferring any improvements on the land to their ownership. The park, and all the money they'd spent on it, would become mine. The smugness of Karen and her cronies was about to be replaced by the cold, hard reality of a very expensive mistake. They thought they had trapped me. They had, in fact, walked directly into my snare. A good engineer doesn't just build. He plans. He designs. He tests. He accounts for every variable. My professional life had trained me to see the world in systems and processes, and the HOA was nothing more than a broken one. The party, the threats, the smugness, they were all just symptoms. The disease was a profound lack of respect for rules, for property, and for others. With the legal and financial irregularities I had already found, I began my quiet, methodical preparation. The first step was to build an ironclad case. I spent the next few weeks submerged in data, cross-referencing public records with the HOA's financial statements, which I was legally entitled to audit as a member. I found a tangled web of questionable expenses, landscaping fees paid to a company owned by Karen's husband, exorbitant catering costs from a vendor with family ties, and a series of consultant fees that appeared to be nothing more than personal cash transfers. Every discovery was a cold, satisfying click of a puzzle piece falling into place. My next step was to find an expert ally. I went to see my old mentor, a retired lawyer named Arthur. He was a man who lived by the letter of the law, a meticulous, principled professional. I laid out my findings on his dining room table, the deeds, the maps, the financial audits. He listened, his face a mask of practiced skepticism, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "You're telling me this woman, this Karen, is using HOA funds to buy herself parties on your land?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. I just nodded, letting the evidence speak for itself. He was initially dismissive, calling it petty neighbor drama. But as I continued, detailing the specific county codes, the precise land boundaries, and the fraudulent transactions, I saw a flicker of intrigue in his eyes. Arthur's skepticism gave way to a quiet admiration. "You've done the work of a forensic accountant and a land surveyor," he said, tapping a finger on a spreadsheet I had created. "This isn't neighbor drama. This is organized fraud." He agreed to help, not because he cared about the party, but because he saw a clear violation of law and a beautifully executed counterplan. He became my guide, helping me navigate the legal minefield, ensuring every step I took was flawless. He warned me that Karen would fight back, that she would be loud and vicious. I told him I was counting on it. "Let her be loud," I said. "I'll be right." 2 weeks passed since I sent my first letter. 2 weeks of silence from the HOA, a silence I knew was a calculated dismissal. It was time for the second step. This time, the envelope I dropped into the HOA's P.O. box wasn't beige. It was a crisp, legal-sized manila folder, thick with the weight of my meticulous work. Inside, there was no ambiguous complaint about a sign. There was a formal notice of trespass. The letter began with an unequivocal statement. "As of this date, you have been in continuous, unauthorized use of private property." It then meticulously laid out the facts, citing the specific lot and parcel numbers, the legal descriptions from the county deeds, and a list of all the events the HOA had held on my land, complete with dates and timestamps. I attached a copy of my survey, showing the boundary line bisecting the so-called community park. The letter demanded that the HOA cease all use of my land and remove all structures, the picnic tables, the sign, the event stage. Within 2 weeks, it ended with a clear threat. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action, including but not limited to a civil lawsuit for trespassing and damages. The phone call came exactly an hour after I confirmed the letter had been delivered. It was Karen, her voice a mix of fury and condescension, the sound of a person whose entitlement had just been publicly challenged. "What is this, a joke?" she demanded, her laughter thin and sharp. "Are you really this petty? You think you can just scare us with some fake letter?" I let her rant, her verbal gymnastics a predictable display of a mind unable to grasp the concept of being wrong. "You're a sad, lonely man," she continued, her voice gaining an ugly edge. "What are you going to do? Bring out your little wolf toys?" The line went silent as she waited for my reaction, for some kind of flustered defense, but I didn't give her one. I had a single, calm, factual response. "The letter is not fake, Karen," I said, my voice as flat as a tabletop. "And the deadline is not a suggestion." I hung up before she could respond. Her smug laughter, her petty insults, they were all irrelevant. I had set my plan in motion, and all she had done was confirm her own ignorance. The feint was over. Now, the main event was about to begin. Her question, "What are you going to do? Bring out your little wolf toys?" was meant to be a final, condescending blow. A joke. But it was a joke that revealed her fundamental ignorance. She had no idea how close she had come to the truth. She had no idea the house on the hill wasn't just mine, it was a sanctuary. The property line she so blithely trespassed on wasn't just marked by a survey map, it was patrolled by a different kind of boundary marker altogether. My two partners in this quiet war were a pair of legal, licensed, and highly trained wolves. Not pets, not toys, professionals. Let me be clear, I am a professional animal handler. My work involves training animals for film, television, and conservation projects. My two companions, Coda and Luna, were part of a specialized program. They were socialized from birth, trained with positive reinforcement, and a level of obedience that would make a military dog look undisciplined. They are not aggressive. They are not savage. They are, however, large, intimidatingly so, with a quiet intelligence in their golden eyes that makes you feel profoundly, undeniably observed. They listen to a select set of commands, a language that only we understand. Stay, guard, return. Each word is a finely tuned instrument of control. They are more disciplined than any person I had ever met, especially Karen, and they are completely legal. I had gone through years of paperwork, background checks, and on-site inspections to secure the proper permits and licenses. My property is zoned specifically for this purpose, with a multi-layered containment system including a secondary fence and a biometric lock on my gate. The county, the state, and even the Fish and Wildlife Service had all given their official blessing. But Karen, in her small-minded world, only saw a solitary man, and what she presumed were big, scary dogs. She had no idea. She thought she had made a joke. In reality, she had just given me a gift. A beautiful, ironic, magnificent gift. She had unwittingly foreshadowed her own downfall, making it all the more poetic. My wolves were not a threat to her. They were a threat to her narrative, to her control, and to her complete lack of understanding of the world she so desperately wanted to rule. After I hung up the phone, a quiet satisfaction settled over me. Karen's laughter and threats were a perfect confirmation. The email arrived the next morning, a digital screed full of bluster and lies. The subject line was "Urgent, Public Safety Threat from Reclusive Neighbor," and the body of the email was a masterpiece of malicious slander. It claimed I had wild animals that were a danger to the community and that my recent legal threats were nothing more than a desperate attempt to avoid my social obligations. They announced that the HOA was taking decisive action and had filed a frivolous lawsuit against me for endangering the public. They believed they had me cornered. They had no idea. As soon as the email hit my inbox, I was already at my computer, a calm and methodical engine of data collection. I saved every single piece of correspondence. The email from Karen, the public notice of their lawsuit, and the barrage of social media posts from her cronies that followed. Each false accusation, each personal attack, was a piece of evidence. I had a digital folder on my computer, a case file that was growing by the minute. It was a beautiful thing to watch their emotional counterattack. They were so busy being angry, so busy being loud, they failed to see that every single action they took was providing me with more ammunition. They had walked right into a trap. By filing a lawsuit, they had forced the matter into a legal arena where emotions are irrelevant and only facts matter. They had just given me a platform to present my entire case: the trespassing, the fraud, and the now documented pattern of harassment and slander. My retired lawyer friend, Arthur, called me, his voice a mix of amusement and professional satisfaction. "They think they're playing checkers," he said. "You're playing chess, and they just moved their pawn into your line of fire. They believed they were cornering me with a frivolous lawsuit and a smear campaign, but they were wrong. They were simply providing me with the final, perfect pieces of evidence I needed to not only win this fight, but to ensure they could never bully anyone again. Their overconfidence was their greatest weakness, and I was counting on it. I sat back, a quiet smile on my face, and waited. The next move was mine. You'd think a public smear campaign and a frivolous lawsuit would make a neighborhood circle the wagons around their self-proclaimed leader. But Karen had been bullying these people for months, and even a well-built house of cards will eventually start to sway. The first email I received was anonymous, sent from a burner account with a simple subject line: regarding the HOA. The body of the email contained a single document, a screenshot of a spreadsheet detailing HOA expenditures, with several line items highlighted in red. Private consultant fees and office supplies were listed, but the amounts were suspiciously large and, as the anonymous sender pointed out, matched the cost of a luxury cruise and a new set of golf clubs. The first ally was a retired teacher named Susan, the same one who had given me the rundown of the HOA meeting. She reached out to me with a quiet, careful phone call. "I saw what she did at that meeting, crumpling your letter," she said, her voice a low, steady whisper. "It was petty, and I know for a fact that she's been using HOA money for her personal expenses. She wasn't seeking revenge, she was seeking justice. Her desire was a quiet, righteous indignation that matched my own." More people began to reach out, each one a small crack in Karen's facade. A landscaper sent me a photo of a check for services never rendered, a check that had been cashed by Karen's son. A woman who had a small catering business told me she had been forced to give Karen a finder's fee in order to get the contract for the community events, a fee that was, of course, paid in cash. They were all afraid of Karen, but they were more tired of her. They weren't looking to get involved in a big legal battle, they just wanted her gone. I assured them their anonymity was my top priority, and they, in turn, provided me with a steady stream of undeniable evidence, texts, emails, and receipts that painted a clear picture of fraud. The frivolous lawsuit, which Karen thought would corner me, had actually become a rallying cry for the very people she had oppressed. They were tired of her tyranny, and they had found a quiet man on a hill who had the skills to fight back. I was no longer an army of one. I was an army of many, all working in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A true antagonist, when cornered, will always double down. Karen had received my final warning. She had filed her frivolous lawsuit, and she was now aware that neighbors were questioning her rule. Her response to all of this pressure was predictable. A massive, extravagant display of dominance. She announced the HOA's annual Solidarity Gala, an event designed to show the entire county that the community was united against the disruptive actions of a single disgruntled resident. It was a party of pure spite, and the kicker? She was throwing it, yet again, on my land. This time, she'd even invited local news crews. She intended to make her victory public, theatrical, and undeniable. I heard about the party not from an invitation I was, after all, a declared public menace, but from Susan and the other quiet allies. They reported every detail: the booking of 2 different food trucks, a professional DJ, and a banner that read in bold, aggressive letters, "Community First." They were so focused on the display of power, they missed the meticulous surgical precision of the plan unfolding around them. While Karen was busy securing a permit for a champagne fountain, I was busy securing something far more substantial. Arthur, my retired lawyer, had executed the next phase with cold efficiency. I wasn't just sending a letter this time. I had completed the legal process to formally revoke access and change the zoning designation of that parcel of land. The paperwork, ironclad and signed by a judge, was already in the hands of the sheriff's department. I had not told Karen or anyone in the HOA. I wanted the element of surprise to be absolute. I knew the exact time the news crews would arrive. I knew the moment the first catering truck would cross the invisible property line. I spent the morning of the gala at home, preparing my companions, Coda and Luna. I checked their harnesses, their leashes, and their identification tags. I dressed, not in a suit, but in the clothing of a working professional: sturdy boots, a simple collared shirt, and a look of detached calm. The whole neighborhood was about to witness a party, but it wouldn't be the one Karen had planned. It would be a lesson in the difference between loud, performative power and quiet, unassailable authority. I was waiting for the perfect moment for the curtain to rise. The first arrivals at Karen's gala were a local news crew, their van a beacon of flashing red and blue lights painting stripes across the manicured lawn. They had their camera pointed at a beaming Karen who was holding a giant pair of ceremonial scissors ready to cut a ribbon on her new community park. It was the perfect moment. I took a deep breath, clipped the leashes to Coda and Luna's harnesses, and walked down the hill toward the commotion. I wasn't alone. Walking just behind me was a local sheriff's deputy, a serious man with a clipboard and a stoic expression. A murmur went through the small crowd as they saw us. The whispers started, "Is that him? And he has dogs." The camera crew, sensing a far more dramatic story than a ribbon-cutting ceremony, turned their lens on us. Coda and Luna, their heads held high, walked with a quiet, powerful grace, their golden eyes observing the scene with a detached intelligence. They moved like shadows, their paws making no sound on the grass. Karen, seeing me approach with the deputy and the wolves, dropped her scissors. Her smile froze, replaced by a look of bewildered panic. "What is this?" she hissed, her voice a low, frantic whisper. "You can't do this." I stopped directly in front of her, my gaze as steady as a rock. The sheriff's deputy stepped forward, his expression unchanging. I didn't say a word. I simply reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila folder, the same one I had sent her 2 weeks prior, now stamped with a court seal. I handed it to the deputy, who, in turn, handed it to a speechless Karen. "This," I said, my voice calm and clear for the cameras and the crowd, "is a court-ordered eviction notice. As of today, this property is legally off-limits to the public." Karen's eyes darted from me to the deputy, then to the manila folder. The look on her face was a masterpiece of disbelief. The news crew was capturing every single moment of her quiet humiliation. The party had been meant to be a show of her absolute power. Instead, it had become the stage for her downfall. She was about to find out that a small lie can have an extremely large price. The game was over, and the trophy was a public, televised defeat. There's a moment in every drama when the villain, no matter how overconfident, finally realizes their loss. Karen's face, which had been a mask of entitled disbelief, contorted into pure, unadulterated rage. She threw the manila folder to the ground, its contents scattering on the grass. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "This is a public event, and those savage beasts, they're a danger to everyone." She pointed a trembling finger at Coda and Luna, trying to incite panic among the small, bewildered crowd. The news cameras swiveled to the wolves, their lenses zooming in on the magnificent creatures sitting quietly at my feet. Karen was in a full-blown meltdown, her carefully constructed facade of a community leader shattering in front of her neighbors and the press. She was a caricature of a bully, reduced to screaming. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even flinch. I just looked down at Coda and Luna and gave them a single, quiet command. Stay. They didn't move, not an inch. They sat perfectly still, their ears perked, their eyes fixed on me, their quiet, disciplined presence a stark and beautiful contrast to Karen's hysteria. The silence that followed her tirade was deafening, broken only by the click of a camera shutter. The sheriff's deputy stepped forward, his face still a mask of professional calm. He picked up the scattered papers from the ground, looking over the judge's signature and the court stamp. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "this man has a court order. This land has been legally declared private property. The HOA has been issued a formal notice to vacate. Any continued presence on this property will be considered criminal trespassing." He gestured to the news crew. "I would suggest you get all of this on film." Karen was speechless, her mouth agape. Her words, her threats, her entire plan had been rendered meaningless by a few words and a single piece of paper. Her savage beasts were nothing more than a well-trained pair of professionals, and her grand party was now a crime scene. She had thrown a tantrum, and I had simply stood there, a quiet, immovable object against her unstoppable force of rage. The public humiliation she had so desperately wanted to inflict on me had been delivered, with surgical precision, right back to her. The moment Karen's face went white with the realization of her defeat, the second wave arrived. 2 black sedans with official seals on their doors pulled up behind the sheriff's car. Out of them stepped a team of uniformed officers, not from the local department, but from the county's financial crimes unit. They carried notepads, evidence bags, and a clear, undeniable authority. The lead officer, a woman with a no-nonsense expression, walked directly past the bewildered news crew and a still fuming Karen. She held up a document for all to see. It was a search warrant. We have reason to believe that the Homeowners Association has engaged in fraudulent activities and misuse of funds, she announced, her voice calm and official. We are here to seize all financial records, computers, and personal devices related to HOA business. She then turned to Karen and the rest of the board members, who were standing nearby, frozen in shock. Please hand over your laptops, phones, and any documents you have on you. The quiet, methodical work I had done over the past months had culminated in this moment. The meticulously documented financial audits, the screenshots from my secret allies, the detailed timelines of trespassing, it was all in a neat chronological file that I had handed over to Arthur, who, in turn, had presented it to the proper authorities. My quiet revenge wasn't just about winning a property dispute. It was about exposing a criminal enterprise hiding behind the veneer of suburban governance. Karen's face, which had been a study in rage, was now a portrait of dawning horror. She finally understood that I hadn't just sued her, I had built a federal case. The news cameras, which she had so proudly invited to document her triumph, were now filming her public and professional ruin. One by one, the board members handed over their devices. The officers began to methodically box up files and ledgers from the catering tables, all of it becoming evidence in a case that was far bigger than a simple neighborhood dispute. The party, meant to be a celebration of her power, had become the scene of her arrest. The finale was swift and decisive. Karen, who had spent the morning preening for news cameras, was led away in handcuffs. The look on her face wasn't one of defiance, but of a profound, shattering shock, as if she couldn't comprehend how a man she had so casually dismissed could have orchestrated her total professional and social ruin. The party, which had been a grand display of her power, was now a crime scene. The caterers packed up their food, the DJ shut down his speakers, and the news crews had more than enough material for a segment that would air on the evening news. The triumph she had craved became her public humiliation. In the days that followed, the neighborhood was in a state of quiet disbelief. The news reports confirmed every detail: the fraudulent financial dealings, the illegal use of my property, and the frivolous lawsuit that had backfired so spectacularly. It was a clear, dramatic example of a bully's downfall. The community, humbled and a little embarrassed by their own passivity, turned to me. They asked for help in setting up a new, transparent HOA. I agreed, but on my terms. We established a board with clear, open-source accounting practices, term limits, and a charter that mandated respect for individual property rights. I didn't want to rule the neighborhood. I just wanted to make sure it was governed by logic, not emotion. The final, physical act of my quiet revenge was the new gate. The county, following the legal victory, had officially rezoned the land at the base of the hill as exclusive private use. I hired a professional team to build a large, black, wrought iron gate at the entrance to the property, the one where Karen's party had been. It was an elegant, simple barrier, a clear and physical statement of my victory. It wasn't about being exclusionary. It was about defining a boundary that had been crossed. My quiet life on the hill was now officially, legally, and physically my own. The quiet man was no longer just the quiet guy on the hill. He was the man who had brought down the entire system with nothing more than a few facts and a well-executed plan. The moral of the story was simple. Some boundaries, like some wolves, are best left alone. People have asked me since all of this went down if it was really worth it. All the time, all the effort, all the meticulous planning just to win a fight over a piece of land and a party. They don't understand. The party was never the point. The land was never the point. This entire ordeal wasn't about property lines or community bylaws. It was about principle. It was about standing up to a bully. It was about proving that quiet, methodical work will always, always triumph over loud, arrogant entitlement. Karen and her cronies were so blinded by their own smugness that they saw my silence as weakness. They saw my professional skills as irrelevant to the daily dramas of suburban life. They thought they could simply steamroll me, that my quiet resistance was nothing more than a personal quirk to be laughed at and eventually broken. They thought a piece of paper meant nothing without a mob to back it up. They believed their performative outrage was a valid substitute for a legitimate argument. But I've spent my life solving complex problems, and I know that the most effective solutions are never the loudest. They are the most precise. I didn't need to shout to be heard. I just needed to be right. I took all of their bluster, all of their lies, and I used it to build a case that was undeniable. I used their own arrogance as a weapon against them. The satisfaction wasn't in seeing Karen in handcuffs. That was just the inevitable conclusion. The satisfaction came from the process itself, from the quiet, methodical application of my skills to a problem that was fundamentally about justice. It was a victory for logic over emotion, for facts over opinion. It was the quiet guy on the hill proving that a calm mind is far more dangerous than an angry one. I had simply done what I do best. I had engineered a perfect solution. With the new system in place and the neighborhood settling back into a new normal, my life returned to its original rhythm. The iron gate stood as a silent guardian at the base of the hill, a physical line that made it clear where the public land ended and my private world began. The sounds of raucous parties and shouting matches were replaced by the quiet hum of the wind through the trees and the peaceful rustle of leaves. The irony of it all, of course, was not lost on me. I am a man who has always valued his solitude, a person who found peace in the absence of other people, and yet, the very act of defending my quiet existence had made me the most influential person in the neighborhood. My role in community management wasn't what you might expect. I don't attend every meeting, and I don't lead every social event. My influence is more like that of a silent partner, an advisor. People now come to me with questions, not about my dogs or my garden, but about financial bylaws and zoning codes. They ask for my advice on how to handle conflicts with logic, not emotion. They've come to understand that my quiet nature isn't a sign of disinterest, it's a sign of focus. My expertise, once dismissed as a bizarre hobby for a petty loner, is now seen as the very thing that saved the community from itself. There's a strange comfort in this new dynamic. I can still retreat to my quiet home, a place of peace and order, but now I know that the world outside my gate is also operating with a measure of peace and order. The new respect I've earned isn't born of fear or popularity, it's born of proof. The quiet guy on the hill became the neighborhood's unexpected architect of change, a man who, by simply defending his own space, created a better one for everyone else. The solitude I craved is now even more profound, because it's truly a choice, and not a state of being forced upon me by others. And that, I've found, is the greatest victory of all. My story has a number of characters, but the most misunderstood ones are Coda and Luna. People see them, and they see a primal, untamable threat. Karen, in her small-minded view of the world, saw them as savage beasts and wolf toys. She believed that because they were different, they were dangerous. But the irony is, my wolves were never a weapon. They were a symbol. They were the ultimate bluff. You see, the entire time, my legal case was a flawless, self-contained system. I had the deeds, the financial records, the documented fraud, and the backing of the law. I didn't need a single ounce of theatrics. But Karen and her HOA were all about theatrics. They wanted a show, so I gave them one. My wolves were the visual cue, the dramatic flourish that made the moment unforgettable. They were the physical embodiment of my refusal to be tamed by their suffocating conformity. They represented the wild, untamable part of me that they so desperately wanted to domesticate. Every single permit, every training session, every command they knew, it was all perfectly legal, perfectly documented. They were professionals, and their presence was just as much a part of the legal notice as the words on the paper. The look on Karen's face when she realized my savage beasts were more disciplined than she was, that was the ultimate victory. She had so arrogantly dismissed them, believing they were nothing more than a childish threat, but they were a trained, legally sanctioned force that she had no idea how to counter. The bluff wasn't that I would unleash my wolves on her. The bluff was that she thought she could fight me on a battlefield of her choosing. But I had my own army, a quiet two-man, two-wolf army that was perfectly trained and ready for the show. The wolves didn't win the war. They just made the victory beautiful. My story ends here, with the sun setting over a neighborhood that has, for the first time in a long time, found a true and lasting peace. I stand on my porch, a quiet silhouette against the fading light, with Coda and Luna at my side. They are as calm and as majestic as ever, their presence no longer a point of contention, but a symbol of the quiet triumph that has unfolded. Looking back, the story was never just about a party. It wasn't about wolves, or lawsuits, or trespassing. It was about something far more fundamental, the power of being underestimated. The smugness of Karen and her cronies was their downfall. They looked at a man who valued his peace and assumed he was weak. They saw a quiet life and mistook it for a life without purpose. They saw a professional who worked with animals and assumed his skills were irrelevant to the world of human conflict. They never saw that my greatest asset wasn't a wolf or a lawsuit, it was my patience. My ability to remain calm and methodical in the face of their emotional chaos. I didn't win because I was stronger or louder. I won because I was more prepared. The satisfaction, I've found, isn't in the victory lap. It's in the quiet, methodical revenge. It's in the feeling of righteous justice that comes from a plan executed flawlessly. It's in knowing that the people who laughed at you are now dealing with the consequences of their own arrogance. The irony is, they got exactly what they wanted, a dramatic, public spectacle. They just didn't realize they were the stars of their own downfall. I'll leave you with this final thought. In a world full of noise, bravado, and empty promises, what's the one thing they never saw coming? The quiet guy, the one who was just watching,